And we're live.
Okay, welcome to the Land Use and Natural Resources Committee, Thursday, September 7th, 2023. Let's all stand for the pledge, and Supervisor Baines, would you do us the honor and lead us in the pledge?
Absolutely. Salute. Pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag.
United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, and justice for all.
Okay. Moving on, welcome everyone. And Robert, could we do roll call, please?
Yes, directors, when I call your name, please indicate your presence. Director Bullahan.
Here.
Frost.
Here.
Gore.
Here.
Harris. Absent. Kennedy. Absent. Nisley. Absent. Kozlowski.
Here.
West.
Here.
Vice Chair Baines.
Present.
Vice Chair Lozano.
Here.
Chair Bradford. Absent. We have a quorum.
I'm late. Sorry. It took me a while to get on.
Let the record show that Director Nisley is here.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on to public communications. Do we have any?
There is no public comment at this time.
Excellent. And now we're moving on to consent calendar. Items 1 and 2 for consent: approve the remote committee meetings and approve minutes for the August 3rd, 2023 committee meeting. Do we have a motion?
I'll make a motion.
Or second.
Okay, we have a motion by Director Bullahan and a second by Vice Chair Baines. Roll call, please.
All right, directors, when I call your name, please indicate your vote. Director Bullahan.
Aye.
Frost.
Aye.
Gore.
Aye.
Harris. Absent. Kennedy. Absent. Nisley.
Yes.
Kozlowski.
Yes.
West.
Yes.
Vice Chair Baines.
Aye.
Vice Chair Lozano.
Aye.
Chair Bradford. Absent. Motion carries.
Okay, moving on to our action item on our agenda: Green Means Go grant submittal and federal regional partnerships. Garrett.
Yeah, thank you. If the committee recalls, last month we had a lot of discussion about Green Means Go, and one of the things we talked about was sort of a status update, what we were doing with the program. And we mentioned last month that there was many federal grant programs being stood up, and we thought maybe one of them might be a good opportunity for Green Means Go. We did our homework. We talked to a bunch of partners in the region, and we think we found a really compelling concept. And so the action is for this committee to recommend the full board to give the approval for us to move forward with a Green Means Go application that would fund planning activities in local green zones. Usually not an overly contentious item to ask to go apply for some funding, but there's a couple aspects of the program, this grant program, that we want to apply to. I just wanted to make sure the committee was aware of. First, the requirements of this federal grant program really hone in eligible and competitive applications into their definition of a disadvantaged community. There's a specific tool they instruct you to use. So what we did, so 26 of our 28 jurisdictions have green zones. Those areas you all have nominated, right? They're your sort of priority areas for infill and revitalization. But when you overlay that or match it up with this screening tool that the federal partners or federal agencies want you to use in this program, it winnows it down to 14 of the 28 jurisdictions, right, have that overlap of they have a green zone and they also meet the federal criteria. So we've been talking to all 14 of those jurisdictions to see if they're interested and if they have a compelling need for some planning funds in their own green zone. I should note too, one of the reasons we're excited about this program is it's very flexible. We talked last month about so many programs are pretty rigid or siloed in terms of eligible activities. This one really meets the broad-based sort of framing of Green Means Go. There's a transportation element to it, of course, but there's also sort of the land use or housing or the non-transportation, like the sewer and water infrastructure that we know are so important to these green zones to get them up and running. So this grant would allow that work to happen in that subset of green zones. So we've been talking to all 14 of those jurisdictions that have a green zone that overlaps with federal designation. And so we're moving forward with trying to get a concept together. It's a quick turnaround. It's due at the end of this month, the end of September. So point one is, right, that the federal designation sort of winnows down from the region to those 14 jurisdictions. Point two is some of that geography is a bit of a challenge for some of the jurisdictions. They might have only one little aspect of their community that sort of meets the green zone and the federal designation. So of those 14, a handful might not even have a concept that they think makes sense moving forward with. And then finally, this is the only application in this program. The program is called Regional Partnership Challenge, but there's a couple sort of maybe sister programs at the federal level that also are having a call for projects or asking for applications, and some of the local jurisdictions will be applying in those. So some of your own staff will all just be thinking through critically, right, their applications of those programs compared to this. Again, this program, its own funding, $450 million. That's nationally. We're going to be competing across the whole nation. So it has its own set aside funding, so it won't be directly competing in any of those other categories or other programs, but it's just a calculus I think your own local agency staff will be thinking about of how many applications they want to put forward into this federal cycle. So again, we think we're going to get probably about a partnership of maybe 10 or so jurisdictions to come together, package it up, and we think a lot of great ideas and package it into the banner of Green Means Go is exactly what this grant program is looking for. But we want to call attention to some of those aspects of the grant before you take an action on it this afternoon. So let me stop there and see if you have any questions.
Okay, is there any public comment, first of all, on this?
There is no public comment.
Okay, questions? Director Gore.
Great, thank you very much. Appreciate it, Garrett. Great opportunity. So it looks like it's primarily a transportation project, or a grant fund opportunity, but it's connecting communities. So you're looking to find some adjacent communities that have some transportation opportunities to work together, correct? And then they have to have some areas of disparity. So that winnows it down to those jurisdictions. And then you're going to be talking to those jurisdictions about possibilities. And then if we apply for funding, would it be for multiple projects in several different areas? And can you give us like a sense of what some of those projects might be? Not to say that they would, but just give us a sense of what they might be.
Yeah, absolutely. So the overarching federal agency is the U.S. Department of Transportation, or DOT. So you're absolutely right, Director Gore. There's a transportation component to this, but they ask explicitly in the grant of sort of they want a holistic response, right? As the transportation improvement comes in, what are you pairing with that transportation improvement to make that sort of community like prime for reinvestment and revitalization? So the transportation element of it is very much about a transportation facility or that transportation infrastructure within the community oftentimes serves as a barrier. You can think of a highway or a railroad track or even a large suburban arterial corridor, right? Very effectively move people through the community, but maybe not so within. So the concepts that will be coming forward on the transportation side would be thinking about how you get community actually across that facility. So we'll take the railroad example, right? Maybe there's no way for pedestrians and cyclists to cross it, except you have to go 8 miles up and then, or so maybe it's a bike ped crossing. For a suburban commercial corridor, right? Maybe it's, safer turn sort of pockets, right? And a better ped experience of islands. If it's a large, corridor or large facility, ped islands across the street. So the transportation aspect of it is how to get that infrastructure that's already in place, serving the local community better. And then sort of the kicker is why we're excited about it is there's going to be a lot of projects across the country that are going to meet that, right? There's a lot of need across the country. We think the kicker is, and then DOT, Federal Department of Transportation, is asked, and then when that transportation sort of facility hopefully is improved, right? It improves mobility, it improves accessibility within that community. But what else is going on to help activate that community on the non-transportation side? And that's why we think Green Means Go is that great fit. We can be talking about land use, right? We can be talking about housing, we're gonna be talking about the wet and dry, the sewer, the water, the wastewater infrastructure. So you pair the transportation with the non-transportation. We think that's why it's a good fit. That's the first part of your question. The second part of your question, Director Gore, is yes, this would fund multiple projects. You know, the 10 we talked about, right, would each would be moving forward with the concept. And again, the whole idea is you add it up, you're tackling a regional issue. So it's not just meant to be one corridor, you're tackling a regional issue. And we think if you put it within the Green Means Go banner, you can frame it as sort of the sum is greater than the parts.
Great, that's very helpful. Thank you very much.
Okay, any other questions by directors? Okay. I think it's a great opportunity, and thanks, Garrett, for the work on this. I'm sure it will benefit many of our jurisdictions. So having no further questions, we need a motion to
Move to approve by Baines.
Okay, we have a motion by Director Baines. Do we have a second?
Frost, second.
A second by Director Frost. And roll call, please.
Directors, when I call your name, please indicate your vote. Director Bullahan? Director Bullahan, can you indicate your vote? Absent. Frost?
Aye.
Gore?
Aye.
Harris? Absent. Abby?
I was on mute, so aye.
Let the record show Director Bullahan voted aye. Nisley?
Yes.
Kozlowski?
Yes.
West?
Yes.
Vice Chair Baines?
Aye.
Vice Chair Lozano?
Aye.
Chair Bradford, absent. Motion carries.
Vice Chair Lozano, if you don't mind, just I could put a finer point on this action you just took. We got wind of this not that long ago. We moved very quickly to secure a grant writer. We moved very quickly, and I just want to really thank the team at SACOG here for reaching out to lots of your jurisdictions. So we have a very short window to do this, but I think Garrett made this point. I want to emphasize it. Had it not really been for Green Means Go and the work that we have done, the work your jurisdictions have done to identify green zones, to look at these kind of disparities, I don't think we'd be in a position to do this and actually pull this application together so quickly. That's not to say we're going to win it, but we've been waiting for all this federal money to figure out where Green Means Go fits. This is the first program that we've really looked at and thought perfect fit. And the last 18 months of work has now prepared us to put this application in. So we may well ask for your support going forward too in the next few months, just to weigh in. This is a regional partnerships challenge. It's designed for regional agencies like ours with local jurisdictions tackling these issues. So we feel like we should be really competitive for this. And I just want to thank our staff at SACOG, but also all of your staff, right? And the relationships we've had so that we can just jump on the phone with people and they say, oh yeah, absolutely. We're in, we're going to be part of this. So stay tuned, but appreciate your support, and you'll see it come through obviously to the full board later in September.
Excellent. Thank you, James. Moving on to the information portion of our agenda, item number 4, Placer County planning efforts, residential infill development in fast-growing community. Greg Chu, you're up.
Thank you. So Greg Chu, I'm on the planning staff at SACOG, and periodically we try to bring before you examples of good planning in the region. And today we've got Placer County. So continuing the theme that Garrett just talked about with grant funds, Green Means Go. We have a couple of grant programs currently that jurisdictions have. There's Green Means Go funds, as well as the REAP funds, which are the regional early action planning grants that the state gave down to SACOG. With those grants, we try to find a couple of examples periodically to bring forward to this committee to just tell kind of what's going on with them, what the jurisdictions are doing, as well as lessons learned that other jurisdictions can apply. So in this year alone, we've had the city of Auburn, Citrus Heights, Yuba City, Folsom, Marysville come talk to us, as well as Placer County, who's speaking today. They were here last year to talk about how they did well with state housing funding. So today we have Jennifer Bias to talk about their efforts for residential infill. Jennifer is a seasoned land use planner with 23 years experience in the field of community planning. She holds a MS degree from UC Davis in environmental biology and land management and an MBA from Drexel University. With a wealth of knowledge, experience, and insights, Jennifer is passionate about strategic planning policy, program management, and fostering cooperative relationships within the ever-growing landscape of community development and land use policy. She's also deeply committed to achieving public land use policy objectives that balance the interest of community development, land conservation, and economic growth. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jennifer, planner from Placer County.
And thank you, Greg. Jennifer Bias again with Placer County. And I think I just have some slide presentation here, mostly so you have some pretty pictures to look at. And I'm going to walk through our successes with the program, the REAP grant program, as well as our Green Means Go, and talk about how we've leveraged those funds to be successful in working towards additional opportunities for infill in our community. And so really the focus today, we're going to talk about Auburn-Bowman Community Plan update. And you can go to the next slide. Kind of again, going over, right, we were awarded 2 REAP grants, $337,000. I'll go a little bit more into detail of what the plan is and how that plan has been playing out. And the real award and the kind of concept that we were coming to with this request was to look at our 1994 Auburn-Bowman Community Plan. And to focus in, again, the grants, we had 2 of them. One was for the sewer study along North Auburn. And then the other second piece was, again, to develop the community plan, again, trying to stimulate infill growth. Next slide. Again, so our grants started in 2021. They were to do a refresh with the Auburn-Bowman Community Plan. It was to accomplish identifying the critical infrastructure improvements that we need to support the vision that was actually the vision for the community plan, the 1994 community plan. A lot of the infill hasn't come forward, and that a lot of that is due to infrastructure constraints. Also, right, our 1994 document was a little dated, and so we wanted to provide some opportunities to make some clarifications and kind of do a cleanup, a refresh, mostly again in support of removing some barriers and providing more opportunities for looking at additional housing. And then again, we were awarded that grant. So next slide, please. And I'm just going to give you a little bit of details so you're familiar with the area, right? Placer County along the I-80 corridor. The area outlined in black here is showing the area 40 square miles. It also includes for the Auburn-Bowman Community Plan, but also is adjacent to and includes, of course, the city of Auburn, and has some great recreational opportunities along the Auburn State Recreation Area. Again, I-80 runs through. I don't know if you can see it. I can't point to it on my screen, but I-80 is shown there in white, bisects the community. And also Highway 49 headed north also kind of bisects the community from the north to the south. Also, this community plan goes all the way up to the northern border of our county, which is the Bear River. Next slide, please. Our 2 study areas which align with our Green Means Go zones are our Highway 49 corridor, which is shown here in the yellow, with some additional hatching, which is our government master plan, which I'll talk a little bit more about. And then also a little community known as the Bowman area, which is the Bowman master plan area. Next slide, please. Again, in 1994, there was a really nice, the community plan really did a great job of envisioning a mixed use compact town for the foothills. Already included, again, providing services to get that infill development, transforming strip commercial into mixed use areas, and kind of providing more opportunities while preserving, again, our community plan is quite wide, the urban core or the town centers and villages, and then along the edges, providing more for those recreational opportunities, scenic vistas, and agriculture areas. Next slide, please. So we had a good base to start, but then kind of going back in time and talking a little bit with this group about how the county is leveraging different planning efforts, including the Green Means Go effort, is back in 2018, we had a consultant write a housing strategy and development plan. We took some of the strategies that came out of that plan and began working on a large package of amendments to our current municipal code relating to providing additional opportunities and for multifamily and mixed use. With that package, we also developed our first multifamily mixed use design standards. As you know, those are the objective design standards that we now look to for having standards when we're talking with multifamily developers. We also began in 2021. We received some fundings from the state Caltrans to look at a mobility and infill acceleration study. And I'll go into that in a little more detail. And then also again in 2019, the county revisioned and looked at the government master plan, which is within the Auburn-Bowman community plan area. And at the same time, we were also working to update our housing element, which we adopted in 2021. So we had a lot going on, and this is just another continuation. This effort that we've started with the Auburn-Bowman community plan is a continuation of a lot of the efforts we've started around 2018. Next slide, please. So again, our related planning effort in our housing element that we have adopted, shown here, again, our plan area with our geographic 80 and 49 corridors. The sites shown in blue are what were known as the candidate rezone sites. They were identified with our housing element as areas to look at for potential rezoning for additional density. Our housing element did require the county to do some rezoning, but all of the housing studies that we've done identified a number of sites that the county could use to select to do that rezoning effort. So next slide, please. Again, here's a little bit more background on our infill mobility study was also coming in. And what that study was looking at was countywide opportunities, but we did end up focusing in and do kind of 3 case studies, one that included the North Auburn area. And that was to look at policies to create, again, more bike-friendly pedestrian communities, getting at how do we get people over time to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and improve more infill opportunities to, again, reduce VMT, vehicle miles traveled. Ultimately, that study is providing policy recommendations that we can use with our Auburn-Bowman community plan update if we choose, or we can use with our general plan update that we're also kicking off this year. Next slide, please. Again, here's our Green Means Go. We were so successful in leveraging our grant funds to work on the Auburn-Bowman community plan, but our scope of work did not have the complete program funded. So we applied for additional rounds of fundings that would help continue our technical studies, as well as one of the necessary steps we have to do with this program is the environmental documentation. So we are happy to say we got additional grant funding through the Green Means Go to continue our work. Next slide, please. Again, updating our objectives, creating that sense of place, looking at opportunities for potential growth, and all of these studies we've been working on coming together in what our planners need, which is good community plan and policies and good land use policies. So with all of our studies and backgrounds, that's what the intent of our Green Means Go effort is, to get this solidified in our community plan policy documents. Next slide. And I did kind of want to talk a little bit more about some of the opportunities as we've narrowed down and gone through working with our consultant. And one of the things I will mention, as you know, again, Placer really has quite a bit of skin in the game. We have consulting services contracts for a lot of the technical studies, but to produce a very professional looking community plan document. But a lot of the rewriting and information that we're doing with the document includes a lot of work that was programmed to be done in-house by county staff. So for 49, again, this area borders the city. It is the regional location for shopping, lots of opportunities. We've had some projects come in that were both employment and housing opportunities. One of our potential constraints or areas that we need to be always aware of is it does have the Auburn Municipal Airport. And of course, there's some land use regulations associated with that that our planning efforts are very aware of. Next slide, please. Again, we're looking at, and shown here is the base commercial area. Most of the 49 corridor shown here in purple and kind of the red is, of course, our commercial and industrial. With our housing package, we unlocked all of our commercial areas to also have opportunities for multifamily housing. So that is already in play. This is coming back and performing again, what we need to do next is get our land use correct, or I don't want to say correct, but get our land use policies in our document to even take that further. So one of the areas that we're working on with this community plan update is right now we're at a base density of about 15 units per acre. How we can look at and where should we look at potentially increasing that to a higher density. Next slide, please. And then again, our previous efforts, we already identified, shown here in brown, our vacant and opportunity areas. So again, our update doesn't need to identify this. We already have all this information that previously went into where can we do additional infill in our community. But then it's connecting to the government master plan, again, shown in hatched, which is housing and jobs opportunities for this area in downtown quarter. Next slide, please. Again, Bowman, nice little community on our way up to the Tahoe area, Truckee Tahoe area along 80. Also provides additional opportunities for us to look at, in particular with our community plan here. We wanted to go with a master plan for this area. So we are working with our update to provide a master plan for this area. But there's a lot of unique opportunities, again, being a centralized area for the community of Forest Hill, as well as travelers along the 80 corridor. Great shopping and dining areas. Also, local school that is in this area. So we've been really working to identify some mixed use opportunities, and again, looking to increase potential density if mixed use or housing was to come into this area, into the infill. Where would it best be located? And then how do we, again, ultimately the technical studies of sewer and water have to come along with unlocking these sites for additional land use. Next slide, please. And this is our current land use plan. Again, as you can see, auto-oriented commercial along the 80 corridor. So our community plan is getting at trying to encourage mixed use and alternative allowances for residential. Again, our density in this community plan is limited to 15 units per acre. So we're looking at either sites or areas under which we can increase the density for multifamily uses. Next slide, please. Again, just going over, we already have the background, and this is how we've leveraged our opportunities. We already had these study areas, and we have quite a bit of background information. on these vacant and underutilized sites that we're rolling into updating our policy document. Next slide, please. So where are we and what's next, right? We started this effort. We began visioning. We've had one workshop session with the community. Most of the community wanted to see their local schools and parks and other favorite restaurants and shops all stay in play. And we did talk about increasing and what increased densities for the foothills might look at. And we are anticipating our next community workshop, I believe, coming up here in the summer next. That's got to be, I'm sorry, that might be the wrong date because I feel like that workshop's got to be coming up here in the winter. So I might have not updated my timeline properly here. But that's where we are. We're still, again, some of the challenges we've had is this wasn't a consultant, here's your contract to update the entire community plan. A lot of the work is being done in-house, which is great opportunity, and building on additional efforts that have been going on for housing for Placer County. I think that's the end of my slideshow. I think next slide, I think that's it. But yeah, so our next step is getting our draft master plan for the community plan out for public review. And both the community plan as well as our master plan, additional public workshops to refine it and get started on our environmental document. Any questions?
Thank you, Ms. Bias, for the presentation. It was very interesting. Any questions by the directors? Director Gore.
Why not? Thank you, Jen. Appreciate the overview. And I think what's really sort of striking to me is how long this work takes, right? Like multiple studies and trying to get it all to a place where you actually can have a plan that then you would hope a developer could use and then build something, right? So I'm really grateful that you're at the point that you're at. That's really good. But I think that that's, to me, what just strikes me, right? And this just takes so much work to do these infill projects and get them to a place where they're ready. You know, you had shared that currently our zoning is 15 units per acre, right? That's what our zone is. And the state now allows like up to 30. Is that correct? Or is it 20? It's like 20 to 30. And I wonder, like, is it, I guess it is the case, right? That you have to have higher density in order for somebody to actually be able to make it viable.
Yeah, and again, I kind of did breeze through one of our initial, when we were going and working on our Auburn Bowman community plan, we were also, again, as our housing element was adopted, your density per acre, right, is really established by your community plan and zoning. But as your housing element is required to show that you have the appropriate number of acres appropriately zoned to accommodate your arena, right? One of the areas we've spent a lot of time discussing is how do we increase, because Placer County, I think our areas that had the 30 units per acre density, which is our metropolitan, right? Under the state's terminology, Placer became a metropolitan jurisdiction, which meant in order to qualify our housing sites under our housing element requirement, we had to meet that 30 units per acre. But overall, we spent a lot of time talking about that. And ultimately, I think it was initially envisioned we were going to do our rezoning program. And at the time, we were envisioning an overlay for our housing element rezoning program, all in the same kind of work program together, because we've had this synergy moving forward with both all of the studying and planning efforts we've done for housing to unlock that, and then again also including updating Auburn Bowman. But as you may or may not know, we have changed and pivoted away from an overlay zone, which means we're pivoting away from any kind of overlay zone in our community plan. So for this community plan update, we're solely focused on what is appropriate densities based on the existing land use. And then to meet our housing element goal, we still have our rezoning program that will be looking at potential sites in this community plan to add additional densities. But overall, we are debating and have been talking internally a lot of what is the appropriate density in this area, you know, given existing uses, historical, and then what we need to achieve. But with most of our community plans in Placer, I think our highest is 30 units, and that is in the government master center is the only place we allow that residential density.
So although the state would say that you could do up to that many units for affordable housing, workforce housing, you know, a jurisdiction doesn't have to do that. Correct? I mean, they can go up, but we have to zone enough to meet the requirement, the affordable, the RHNA numbers, right? We have to zone enough to perhaps meet that, but all these sites don't have to be up to that amount. They could be a lower amount. Is that correct?
Correct. Right. Our community plan
helpful for
can
me.
establish densities per what the community plan wants to recommend. Our accounting for our RHNA numbers, right? That is based on a strict criteria and qualifications that we have to meet for the state and through HCD. Right.
Thank you.
But all of our community plans can establish, and again, you know, I believe, and again, most people here, Placer is embarking on our general plan update. Again, we have a circa 1994 general plan that's had some updating along the way, but this will be the first time that the county is looking at land use, and it'll be some discussion around what is appropriate densities in certain areas of the county. That's beyond the reap and green means go. We're having those discussions right now currently in the area in and around Auburn. And hopefully we'll get the needle for increasing densities, as well as, again, I think the county has already leveraged and done a lot to unlock housing through our previous work effort. So this second effort and the money that came from the initial REAP funds, and ultimately the second wave will look at the infrastructure needed to help unlock those sites, as well as get the environmental clearance to help unlock the sites. So leveraging it all the way, and we're always grateful. And I would just say, since I was the one that submitted the application, even your staff is fabulous for helping us answer questions about grant application, and your forms and instructions were great. So I really appreciate you guys inviting me to come and speak today, and Placer will hopefully continue to leverage where we can under this program or any other programs, but you guys have a very nice program.
Vice Chair Lozano, can I just say something real quick? I know Director Buell has her hand up, but just Director Gord, to your point on the, I think I've been in a bunch of meetings recently where units per acre, you know, came up, right? 15, 30, 50, 10. And I don't know who, I'm trying to remember exactly when this was. I believe it was a while ago, because I think we were over, our board meeting was in the Cal Cities building. So we were doing a renovation. So 2019, I'm going to guess, we had a guy named Daniel Perola come and actually show pictures of housing and had you all guess densities, and nobody could guess. So the idea being dwelling units per acre is almost like a planning verbatim, and what's more sometimes important for people is scale, right, and mass and height, which sometimes now is expressed through floor area ratio. I know in El Dorado County, I think they had either Daniel or somebody similar come up and do a lot of work in the county to understand how they can get more housing at an appropriate scale. Anyway, really highly recommend. In fact, I believe he's in Utah today and is referencing the Sacramento region, but highly recommend him and folks like him on, especially if you're updating your general plan, right? Just to begin community conversations on, we need more housing, we need more multifamily. We obviously don't want it to tower over single family, but there's a way to have that conversation, I think, that is a little bit more than dwelling units an acre. And if anybody's interested, we can circulate after this some links to some of that stuff, because I think it's very good as communities and neighborhoods get involved in the sort of multifamily and the density conversations.
Excellent. Director Bullhon, you have a question?
Yeah, that's an interesting presentation. But I remember you were talking about RENA. I know with Ileton, and Greg's familiar with that. Like, it's like it gets contentious at some meetings because, like, especially the low income element. I mean, like the very low end, they wanted to assign this one area as low income, and they're like it's near Village on the Delta subdivision, and then somebody is crying about it. I'm like, well, they designated that area that was originally a low income area. So I don't know if they'd watched that film Bound for Glory, because that's where it was. So but it gets contentious with low income and zoning for that, especially in Ileton.
Yeah,
But
as Ms. Bias was saying, they were looking at a plan from 1994 to today, and that's what, almost 30 years, and my goodness.
Ileton's is from 2000.
So any other questions, comments?
Just to clarify Ms. Bullihan's comment. So the RENA process doesn't identify areas are considered low income or high income or middle income. What they are is designations for densities and whether or not they're meets the state requirements for meeting minimum densities, not whether or not they're low income or not. So for the area that Ms. Bullihan was referring to, those areas the city was considering increasing the densities to meet the state standards, but still giving the option to the property owner on what they want to do with that. So there's not a requirement that they make 30 units to the acre. It's that there's the possibility of zoning to get up to 30 units to the acre. But if it has a range, let's say from 10 to 30 units to the acre, the property owner can still opt to take the 10 units to the acre option, as long as there is the option to be able to get to the 30 units to the acre.
Right. Great, thank you for that clarification. Do we have any other comments? Any other questions? Thank you, Ms. Bias, for your time and the presentation.
Thank you for inviting me. Thank you.
Okay, moving on to information item number 5, the 2025 Blueprint Outreach Update regarding focus groups. Zach, there he is.
Yes, thank you very much. My name is Zach Miller, and I'm the new program manager for the Blueprint here at SACOG. So as part of the outreach and engagement effort for the 2025 Blueprint, SACOG is really looking to go above and beyond the state and as well as the federal requirements with a robust engagement plan. So during the first phase of this outreach, which occurred over approximately the last year or so, SACOG's implemented a number of different awareness building tactics to increase engagement among a number of different groups and within the region as a whole, including low-income communities, communities of color, partner agencies, stakeholders representing a broad variety of interests throughout the region, as well as all other interested community members. So further, SACOG has really utilized a variety of methods to conduct this outreach and gather feedback from communities within the region. And this has included local tours and presentations to boards and councils, polling, what we call the built environment poll, as well as surveys designed to gauge the public's priorities and interests, pop-up workshops and combined kind of partnerships with community-based organizations, and finally, focus groups. So the focus groups are the subject of the presentation from C2 Research that you'll be hearing today. And just to provide a bit of introduction and context on the focus groups. So SACOG contracted with C2 Research to host a series of focus groups, and we really want to gain insights directly from our region's residents through these focus groups. And we want to do this to help inform policy discussions around creating the vision, the setting of priorities, as well as developing strategies for the 2025 Blueprint update. And really the overarching purpose of the focus groups were to gauge interest gauge residents' priorities and interests with respect to a variety of topics. And these topics included housing, road pricing, perceptions of safety, primarily transportation safety, as well as public health. And this was really done through a total of 8 focus groups. So 4 of the focus groups were held in English and 4 were in Spanish. And I'd like to note here as well that participants were screened and recruited to ensure that there was a diverse mix of our region's residents that were represented within the focus groups to ensure kind of a representative sample of the region. So with that bit of background and context, I'd like to pass it over to Sherry Close from C2 Research to introduce herself and provide a much more detailed description of the focus groups and the outcomes from this specific effort. So Sherry,
Great.
Take it away.
Thanks, Zach, for the introduction. Hi, everyone. I'm Shelley Bogetta-Chikloza from C2 Research. We're based in Placer County in Roseville off of Vernon Street in the downtown area. So it's a pleasure to be here and to kind of share with you some of the high-level learning that came out of each of these conversations. Again, so we had 8 groups in total, 4 conducted in English, 4 conducted in Spanish. And we broke each of the focus groups down, again, by research theme. So as Zach was saying, from housing, the perceptions of pricing options for post-taxes issues, perceptions of safety, and public health. What I loved most about the groups is the range of respondents that we had. So we broke it down by topic and invited respondents, members of the community from all the different counties, member counties in one group. I should also note that the timing of this research was in the spring, earlier this year, and it was right after, an atmospheric river that happened. And so some of our residents, experienced flooding. So that was very top of mind. We had respondents who were experiencing issues with changing interest rates. So when it came down to the conversation about housing, that was very fresh and very much of concern to them. And then also in terms of stability and employment, some folks were going through company downsizing and uncertainty. So that was just a snapshot in time in spring of this year. Again, the objectives were to gain feedback, to gain key learning, and really to hear some of the nuances, to hear some of the stories, to help support some of the quantitative work that has been done to date. So the overall themes that came out of the housing group, and some of these may not be, ahas, but it may, reconfirm some of the earlier research and learning from the quant work, and also your own personal belief in the discussions that you've had with your own property stakeholders and communities. But the big issue that folks were finding across all of the different regions was a lack of affordable housing options. We had individuals who were renters. We had individuals who were living with family members. So we had the whole gamut. We had individuals who were empty nesters, but now wondering at what point in time should they downsize and where do they go next based on their life stage. So the overall consensus is that when you're thinking about housing in the region, one size fits all will never work. There needs to be a variety of options, a variety of choices for members of our community. And again, life stage influenced their preferences. And the biggest shift for them was the post-pandemic effect. So folks spent a lot of time in their homes and over their housing situations over the last couple of years. And that really influenced their priorities of what they were looking for based on their personal experiences, being able to walk to a nearby cafe, being able to walk to an open space. Many of these considerations became a higher priority as a result of their experiences during the pandemic. In the second focus group, and I should also mention that their view of work also changed as a result of the pandemic and their experiences with their home, where having the option to work remotely became a bigger concern and consideration for them. So the distance in which they were willing to travel changed significantly. So some of our folks used to travel to the Bay Area for their jobs. now they're, you know, specifically looking for new employment opportunities where they will no longer have to travel more than 30 minutes or 30 miles each direction when they have to return to the office. Our second focus group was based on pricing, specifically different types of taxes and tolls that could be considered, you know, as gas taxes start to decline over time, and folks start to look at alternative to gas taxes. So when we were talking about, you know, transportation, how they view transportation, every single respondent that we talked to had access to at least one car in their household. Again, many of these were shared households, living with relatives, living with, you know, friends, having, you know, children. So all the folks that we talked to had access to at least one vehicle. Now, 1/3 of our respondents across the board, this is the 69, you know, respondents that we talked to, used bicycles, and their usage again changed as a result of the pandemic. They're exercising more. They're starting to use it more for a traditional mode of transportation. But there are some other factors that I'll get to in just a moment that influence when and where they ride a bicycle. Same thing with shared electric mobility. A number of our respondents in downtown settings had noted that they had previously utilized electric scooters, but they also voiced their concerns about how they're being stored, safety on the streets, and so forth. Only 1/5 of our respondents mentioned using public transit, and that included light rail as well as public buses. And the biggest concerns were regarding safety, a theme that we will come across in our next research topic in just a moment. We are also looking at 4 different types of scenarios, pricing options for an alternative to a gas tax. Things such as, you know, an increase in a local sales tax, looking at, you know, toll roads was, you know, another particular area. And the overall feeling that folks were having, this became actually kind of a contentious, you know, part of the conversation where people were trying to understand. They recognize that right now there are some tax inequalities between electric vehicles and gas vehicles, but they believe that when it comes time to talking about road maintenance and the development of new roads, that there should be no tax inequalities between the two because both are utilizing the roads. They understand that for early adopters and given certain circumstances, electric vehicles should have a tax credit because the air quality should improve. But when it comes to actual roads and conditions of roads, they believe that all types of vehicles should be treated the same with respect to passenger vehicles. We also approached the idea of a usage-based fee, a user-based fee. And there was great concern, especially amongst our audiences in rural areas, more remote areas, folks that we talked to in Wilton, folks that we talked to in Yuba and in Sutter. They just felt that given the resources of where they live and the infrastructure of their communities, it would actually be a hindrance, would actually harm them more than others. And they also felt collectively as a group that it would be very challenging to monitor and manage a usage-based toll in that regards. Toll lanes were also probed, and those were viewed as acceptable. But the key part about toll roads, and many had used toll roads in the Bay Area, had used toll roads in Los Angeles. Many of them have, their fast track passes, though they voiced concern about not really knowing how much tolls were with the fast track and prepayments required for that. So overall, toll roads were acceptable, but they wanted to make sure that there would be an alternative route for those who did not want to take advantage of that particular way of expediting their journeys. The third topic of our focus group was this perception of safety, how the relationship between safety and transportation. The biggest concern to the respondents that we talked to, that we sampled, was this idea of distracted driving. They're seeing it even more. They sense that even in post-COVID times, people are becoming, really self-centered on the road, and they're getting distracted with other interests. And so they want to have a focus more on getting back to the basics, on being in safety on the road. They also felt that there was a lack of safe, active transportation infrastructure. Again, from their experiences using public transportation, such as light rail and the buses, they're just not seeing a lot of usage, and they're not seeing a presence of officials. They say that they see the conductor on the train, but that is it. They're not seeing tickets being enforced. And so there's just concerns about their own personal being going on these different modes of transportation. As I mentioned, this research took place shortly after the atmospheric rivers that impacted the region. And there was great concern about, being able to evacuate. Folks talked about their experiences. Long tenured respondents who've lived in the region for an area talked specifically about their own experiences, about having to evacuate during a flooding event, during a wildfire event. And they want to, again, make sure that there's more than one way out of a community in an emergency consideration. They also felt that additional education and outreach was needed. And this is on many different topics. So you're going to hear me mention this a few points during these slides, but really about going back to the basics and learning how to drive. Signs, the big topic was roundabouts. A lot of folks simply don't know who has a right of way in a roundabout. And this becomes a growing concern, especially in regions such as downtown Sacramento, where you're sharing the road with bicycles, with e-scooters, and folks just simply do not know how to properly merge into the roundabout or even on freeways. They felt that enhanced signage and education could help alleviate some of these challenges. Another issue that came up was just the conditions of roads and overall the topic of potholes. There was a great deal of concern about potholes on freeways, on local roads, and the impacts it plays on their vehicles ultimately can lead to accidents, increased insurance, and overall stress. So that was a major concern for the respondents in our community. Our last focus group focused on public health. And this is in context to the sense of public health and transportation specifically. So we talked to folks about the frequency of walking and biking. And again, everyone acknowledged that they have been walking more in post-pandemic times, but their destinations varied based on whether they were in an urban, suburban, or rural community. Simply put, those in rural areas were looking for more options, looking for more choices of destinations that they can go to, whether it is at a park where they can do some physical fitness, whether there are defined walking paths. There was kind of building off that previous group about safety, we heard about concerns about walking on nature trails and their physical well-being. So there's a great deal of interest of getting out there, but they need some additional motivating factors to get out there, places to go, a sense of purpose, whether it's a destination on the road. Their personal life stages also impact the frequency and ability to walk, and whether they're using a bicycle or if they're using, walking and so forth. We also talked to folks about, air quality and the presence of trees in the region. And people are extremely proud of the trees in the region. Some folks, they talked about mature trees, and they also talked about new developments where there are young trees that fully haven't grown, but to provide shade, and they're really looking forward to seeing them flourish over time. A couple points I just wanted to call out. The findings were generally consistent across our groups between the English and the Spanish language groups. But when it came to the topic of housing, our Spanish language groups tended to voice a higher level of enthusiasm for mixed-use housing or smaller housing footprints. Our first generation respondents, or those who became naturalized citizens, were also seeing that these would be potential benefits for first-time home buyers and cost-conscious renters, also giving them a path to home ownership. The Spanish respondents that we talked to noted that they personally, at this point in time, do not have electric vehicles in their households. But they were also relying on public transportation slightly more than our English language groups. And they talked a lot about using rideshare apps for their transportation needs, and also talked about some of the communities around here who had very successful on-demand bus programs to help increase frequency of those routes that were in locations that were in demand. When it comes to the conversation about potential pricing options and alternatives to gas taxes, our respondents really wanted to make certain that policymakers in the community are really considering about individual income levels before implementing a decision on any decisions regarding tolls or usage taxes, to ensure that there is equity in action across the community. Ultimately, we talked about what are ways, to help improve their experiences, to help decision makers make right policies, and a few themes emerged. Number one was housing diversity and affordability. They also talked about the importance of public-private partnerships. Folks really got, those who lived in housing communities or had family members or friends who lived in housing communities talked about the benefits of it, of how developers will come in and think about parks and schools and the placements, and really together it really is the right fit. And to ensure that there are enough affordable and diverse housing options based on various life stages for our community. And looking at mixed use developments and sustainable communities was extremely important to folks. Having walkable areas, sustainable communities where people can get the resources and the services that they're looking for. And ultimately looking at sustainable urban growth, thinking about, they're very mindful of the increase in traffic, increase of folks moving to the region, and making sure that it is sustainable long-term. From a transportation perspective, they're interested in looking at alternatives, but it needs to be viable. It needs to be frequent. It needs to go to the destinations that they are looking to go to. They're also very concerned with promoting safety, physical safety, as well as road safety, with different types of vehicles sharing the roads. They recognize that an alternative gas tax will be required given changes. And again, they're interested in looking at ways to improve homelessness in the region. And ultimately, this can be, helped to be communicated through additional education, awareness, and outreach. I will pause there and see if there are any questions from the group regarding the high-level findings.
Thank you, Shelley. Appreciate it. Any questions from the group?
Does any of this research surprise you in any way? Or does it validate some of your earlier conversations?
That was kind of one of the things that I considered was, is this, does this validate what we've heard at the, the Blueprint workshop back in June, and those kinds of things. And I don't know. Any thoughts, Zach?
Yeah, definitely. I can jump in on that. I think we saw, when cross-referencing the results, we saw a lot of similar responses, especially on housing. So a lot of the respondents in the built environment poll, which was one of the outreach tools that I mentioned earlier, were also very concerned about affordability and recognize that, housing type needs differ across the region and based on what point in life you're at. And I think it's also important to note here that the responses really differed based on whether the respondent was a homeowner or renter. And that really, across both those, the survey as well as the focus group kind of held true. Another item was that was very similar across that built environment poll, which had a much larger sample size, obviously, than the focus groups, was how the pandemic has affected travel behaviors, with, folks across all efforts and all workshops really responding that their personal vehicle usage and their commuting, especially for work, has declined by virtue of the pandemic and some of the, work from home options that we have now. So that's just to say we've seen a lot of similarities across the different outreach methods that we've used, and we're in the process of compiling and analyzing all those results and really cross-referencing them. So I think at a later date, we can have a much more detailed response regarding that.
And I think just one of my thoughts was also that what I've heard throughout this is a kind of common theme is, there are a lot of the transportation modes change obviously because of the pandemic and people working from home, like you mentioned. But the other thing I've heard is, at least certainly in my community, that's a little more rural in terms of commuting. One of the things I've heard is if you're going to ask people to get out of cars, you have to show them the benefit. And I heard that today in the presentation, but that's going to be huge because we could talk about alternative modes of transportation all we want, but unless there's some incentive for somebody to get out of their car, people aren't going to commute up to Folsom and Rancho Cordova from Galt any other way other than jumping in their Tesla and getting up there. And so I think that as we move forward, it's going to be important to talk about. So
yeah, and I think if I can add on to that a bit, we did see that was another item that we saw a lot of consistency between the polls and the workshops, that the majority of respondents use a personal vehicle still, and noted that public transportation can be inconvenient at times, and sometimes they don't feel safe using it. However, a lot of the respondents did note that they would be much more willing to use that form of transportation if improvements were made, around security or lighting, and, increasing frequency and just making it much more accessible as well as convenient for the user. So yes, I think that's definitely something that we saw across many of the responses.
Definitely. Well, thank you for that. And we have a few questions. I'm just going to go left to right on my screen. I don't know who chimed in first, but Director Gore, you're the first on.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Shelley. That was actually really interesting. Just, I think most of what you shared rang true with what we've been hearing and what we've been talking about. I think the thing that stuck out to me as well is that people pretty much don't want to commute as far, right? About 30 miles, which is not really surprising, but you would not know that sometimes when you get on the freeway in Sacramento, right? It's like, that doesn't really, like, the traffic is back and I don't know how much less people are traveling. So that's sort of interesting because I think it carries in for us in the future about air quality, right? Are there fewer miles being traveled, right? And that's the data, I guess, that our SACOG team has to look at, because that's interesting. People don't want to travel as far. Totally get that. But you wouldn't notice it by getting on the freeway most days. Sometimes mornings are amazing if I go into Sacramento, and other times I am like, nothing has changed, right? So it's interesting, and I really appreciate your findings and sharing with us today.
Hey, Director Bullhorn.
Hi. Yeah, as far as the transit and traveling, because I have neighbors that work in the Bay Area, and and I can figure where I'm at. There's Highway 12 and 160. There's always like incidents with those two highways all the time. Like August 31st. I mean, the bridge could not completely close on Highway 12, so folks were like snarled up on 160, and I got caught in that. So that was pretty bad. And then as far as public transit, we have that South County link. I knew a lady that she would only use that on Wednesdays to go to the flea market, but she wouldn't go home that way. She'd get somebody to pick her up to take her home. So yeah, those are comments that I'm making about that. So yeah, a lot of inconvenience.
By the way, that was the great thing about the research, why you do qualitative research. Qualitative research gives you a chance to really hear those emotional stories and those experiences that people have on all of these topics. So thank you for sharing those examples, because like I say, in these groups, people were very specific. They're very passionate about their region. They're very hopeful. They're very excited about the future, but they also had to call out some of their daily challenges of certain intersections and interchanges on certain roads that cause headaches. And so it's wonderful to hear your personal experiences as well.
And then as far as working from home, it's like not conducive since internet is awful in my area. And we had somebody that sold her house because of it.
So we actually heard, and I should have made that notation during our conversation, that was a major concern for many people, was having that reliable internet. The broadband capabilities was certainly something that was of consideration, that allowed people to move from urban settings to more rural areas and enjoy the development there.
But
Great.
thank you for your
so much.
presentation.
Director Nicely.
Hi, I'm sorry if I missed this, but did you tell us the ages of these participants?
It
Because
was a whole gamut. And again, there's a supplemental report that will show you the composition of each of the conversations and who they, the types of personas that they are. But we talked to everyone across the, from new graduates all the way up to empty nesters. So it was, we had the whole range of representative sample of the community.
okay, so this was tied to people that were probably working or just retiring,
Or
but
going to
not your
school,
elderly.
or going to school, and by the way, we used multiple prongs for recruiting to ensure, while the groups were held online, we made certain that we did outreach in traditional ways and also digital formats, because we wanted to make certain that we heard representation of those who may not have been as tech savvy. Trust me, our office had to do a lot of technical support to help folks get on, some of our folks get on the platform, for the session. But we really wanted to make sure that we had a great range of everything, including a time in the region. We had folks who were born and raised in the area. We had individuals who had recently relocated for in the last couple of years. So it was really a great mix of ages and experiences in the community.
Okay, so our areas where we is pretty semi-rural. There are a lot of elderly people who are looking for smaller downsizing houses, but the other issue they have is they aren't driving, and how close they are to medical and to other activities. I just want to make sure that when we're doing this big blueprint for this, that we're looking at all ages, and I know that we're focusing on economic development with the workforce and those kinds of things, but I just feel like I just have to represent the elderly people and make sure that we're asking those questions to them also.
Thank you for mentioning that. I mean, that was certainly a point that came up in our groups, and proximity to healthcare, proximity to emergency services. All of that was a consideration. And some of our respondents, especially our older demographics who were looking for alternative housing options, started to comment and note new developments. They're reading in the newspapers. They're reading, they're hearing on the radio about new developments, new housing that's coming up that's targeted for active adults or seniors who need assistance. So all of that is certainly top of mind with the respondents that we heard from.
Great, thank you.
And I'll also note to that effect that within the blueprint, we are really looking at alternative forms of transit, public transportation. I think it was mentioned earlier, looking at micro transit or on-demand transit, almost like a public transit service similar to a Uber or Lyft,
Right.
and other alternatives to your traditional, fixed route bus or light rail service. So that's definitely a consideration that we're taking into account in the blueprint.
I'm really glad to hear that. Like, I even had the example today at the senior center, someone who lived in Rockland had to get to Loomis. They didn't have a ride and they had to do the Uber, and it's just not affordable for them to do an Uber every time they got to go to the senior center. So I thank you that you're looking at that portion of our population too.
Hey, any other questions or comments by directors? Staff, James, Clint, Zach, do you have anything else? Anyone?
Vice Chair Lozano, I think it's been said here, but I would just say, again, it's been a while since the last MTP SES update. In fact, little trivia, at least 20 of you are brand new on the SACOG board from when we last adopted MTP SES. So this is more engagement and public opinion polling, and we didn't do focus groups last time. And it's gonna, I think Zach mentioned, it's gonna keep coming. So we'll get more results from all the surveys with the pop-up workshops coming. We're really excited about the richness of this data, and yeah, so as the committee that oversees the development of the blueprint and the long range plan, more to come on this, and a lot of our also you'll hear in the next few months, we get a lot of the survey responses back, more than we've ever had before, because of the partnerships we've had with community-based organizations. So they push it out through their channels, which we just don't have. So that, again, that's coming. We'll get the results of all that, and then try to sort of synthesize that and wrap it up and feed it into the next phase of the blueprint.
Excellent. If there's no other discussion on this item, we'll move to receive and file. We have the one item. Any other directors have anything else to comment on before we adjourn? Okay, our next meeting is Thursday, October 5th at 1:30 via Zoom. And with that, we'll adjourn. Have a good evening.
See you all.
Thank you.